to what that group did not get to. And my other question is, what exactly do we mean by clarity in sentencing?
Two good questions. I don't think that the group was going to go back to misdemeanor and traffic. However, felony work that did not get voted on or did not pass, some of the things about extreme indifference that was recommended but didn't go forward. Some of the things about that those classifications, maybe additional work on, we never got to sex offenders. We put that aside, whether we needed to relook at anything in the drug area. And we really didn't ever get to the goal of trying to figure out whether we needed extraordinary risk or not, or whether we could do that. And clarity is basically, I mean, we pretty much never wanted to say truth in sentencing, but we did want to have a discussion about the issues that were identified by both offenders, families, and victims, and most agencies, that our system of earned time, good time, parole, et cetera, is very complicated and very hard to explain. And because of a lot of the enhancements that we have, sentencing isn't very clear to the public at large, or to the offender, and lawyers have a difficult time explaining exactly a lot of things. So that is what we're trying to do, and see if we can be more clear in terms of time and, parole eligibility, et cetera. Knowing that's a heavy lift. But the reason it says do not increase costs of incarceration is, I think the goal was not to blow up prisons.
Yeah, I think the clarity thing was, Tristan, remember, we kind of moved toward that terminology to get away from banding around truth in sentencing, because that means so many different things and it's politicized. And we really just wanted to get to what Maureen's describing for everyone in the system. How can we make it easier for all of us to understand what a sentence to an F4, what it means when you're out? Everybody wants that. So we kind of rested on clarity maybe 2 years ago. I don't know that there's it's not perfect, but I think it's a lot better than saying truth, because truth is just too charged.
Yeah, I hear you on that, Tom, and thank you both for those clarifications. I don't have any other concerns to bring up.
Thank you. I will continue around with the unsolicited input and asking for it right after I get to some hands that are up. Let me go to Representative Weissman and then to Vincent.
Thank you, Barrick. I just had a small comment where we talk about purposes of sentencing over relatively recent years. We've also tried to update some statutory purposes of probation and purposes of parole. You could possibly construe sentencing to reach over those other two, but we have separate frameworks. There's been work in the case of probation as recently as 22. I think parole goes back to 17 or 18 to update those. I thought it might just be worth being a little bit more specific that we intend to continue to look at the high-level aspirational statutory purposes of all three of those.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's a good point. I think we do have a statutory purpose of sentencing in addition to probation and parole in Title 16.
Yeah, Maureen, agree. I think my only point is call out all three.
Okay. So we could say the statutory purposes of sentencing, including probation and parole.
Hearing Representative Weissman.
I'm sorry, Barrett, could you say again?
I didn't know if you were still speaking. You cut off pretty quickly.
No, I was just answering Maureen's question. I was done. My point was just that instead of referring to statutory purposes of sentencing, we should refer in the disjunctive to statutory purposes of sentencing, probation, or parole or end parole. So we have language on the books for all three.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Maureen, are you clear where we would make that adjustment to the duties?
Yes, I am.
Vincent and then Director Hilton.
Hi. So mine is just a comment about language preference in the bullet regarding mental health, behavioral health, and substance use. And this is just from an advocacy perspective for inclusivity.
Yeah.
And I would suggest changing suffering from to living with, and changing disorders to conditions.
And does anybody have any concerns about those suggestions?
I don't.
Thank you, Vincent. I appreciate that.
And forgive me if I missed some order here. Emily, I believe you were going to be up next. And then Adrian, Director, I'll get to you.
Thank you. I guess my only question is on the same bullet that Tristan raised around the thoughts around improvements that do not increase cost of incarceration, because I could imagine some improvements might require additional funding. And if that's limiting then in terms of the scope of what the commissions or committees could look at.
Do you have language you'd like to offer or specifics within that you'd like us to look at editing? And I just changed these from bullets to numbers to hopefully make it a little easier for folks.
I guess I was curious about the thought behind it, and if there is a reason why there's that no cost included here, and if there isn't a foundation for why that needs to be included, then I would say improvement that contributes to clarity, and kind of just strike the cost part from that line.
Maureen or Tom?
Well, I would like to have that in there because I think we have to be aware of it, but I respect your point, Emily. Because I hope that groups are aware that if they're going to recommend a program change or whatever, that they have to identify or look to where cost savings might be. So,
I mean, you could do it maybe, Maureen, with like a priority language, like recommendations for improvement that
well,
prioritize.
you could put it down the bottom while maintaining public safety and cost-effective programming, or cost, something like that. I forget what they talked about it in old TCJJ. We were supposed to be aware of money.
I think cost effective makes sense. I just wouldn't want the group to limit their brainstorming and ideas on this idea that it would be no cost. I think that mindfulness around not including costs, I think I understand the sentiment of it behind it, but I'm just not sure that that's probably the right language if we don't want to be limiting in terms of visioning it.
The CCJJ said cost-effective crime prevention programs, so you could cost-effective program. So what you would delete? So it would say improvement
that contribute to clarity in sentencing, achieving that while maintaining public safety and
with cost-effective programming.
And cost, I would say, and cost effective program.
Yeah, that's fine. Does that get there, Emily?
I think so.
I understand your point, because, yeah, you know, I think, you know, there are times I think improvement could mean more, not less, so.
Right. So sometimes it takes more to make meaningful change and sometimes it doesn't. So
Yeah. Does that, are folks okay with that?
So I have a concern about that. If we're eliminating the language after improvement that do not increase costs of incarceration, I think there's an interpretation of the phrase clarity in sentencing that just means eliminate good time and earned time, make sentences effectively way longer. That would definitely increase the costs of incarceration. And if you take that language out, I don't see anything in this point that prevents that, and I'm against that.
I think, Tristan, I would agree with that to some degree, but I think I could also read it as like, what if we invested in other programming or treatment or that kind of thing? Not necessarily putting, you know, money towards keeping people incarcerated for longer. So I think, you know, in thinking holistically about where money could go, I think I agree.
And I would add too that clarity doesn't necessarily mean a truth in sentencing, because from a Department of Corrections standpoint, we could use some additional clarity, just clarity in earned time and good time, both of which are useful tools, you know, that don't necessarily, either in my opinion, right, personal opinion, need to be thrown out with the bathwater, but there's room for clarity, particularly in how those two statutes speak to each other. So I'm not sure that clarity does necessarily mean that we're talking about truth in sentencing. I think it just means clarity in sentencing as a whole. And when we talk about, I mean, you want to talk about a rat's nest of things that need clarity. Yeah, our sentencing laws, when you talk to my time comp folks and you try to look at people who have, you know, overlapping sentences that go back several years, and trying to determine, you know, which comes first and which sentence, you know, governs here and which one goes there, and does this one get earned time or does it fall into a you know, a rabbit hole where, you know, for this portion they do or don't get earned time. Yeah, there's clarity needed there. So I do think clarity is useful. And sorry for jumping in, but that's my 2 cents on that specific piece.
Director
I do have a
Hilke,
different point, but
Director Hilke, I've seen your hand up. Did you want to weigh in on this point, or do you want to come in after we wrap on this bullet?
No, while I have the opportunity, I'll just say, I agree with what Adrian just said. You know, time and comp people are, they have a really difficult job, and we could probably do better as a system of educating everybody about how that looks and how that works, and provide clarity. And I understand what Tom said about the difference between the term truth in sentencing and clarity. I also will say that I'm a little bit, I don't want these duties to be weaponized against the group. And how that would look is somebody who doesn't want us to do, you know, say the legislature says, hey, we'd like you to look at this, and it doesn't fall within here. You know, I think the first 2 bullets particularly probably are broad enough that it can capture most anything. But I do want to make sure that we kind of have some ambiguity there to fit in things that are important, because we don't know what's going to come down the pike that may be super important. And then on cost effectiveness, sort of the same thing. I feel a little bit about that. I mean, while we all have to be cost effective, you know, some really good idea might come along that might cost a lot. And as a public policy, people who are recommending public policy, the cost of it sort of comes at another level. If it's really good public policy and there's strength in vote, we should recommend it anyway. And, you know, let our state elected officials wrestle with what the cost is. I don't want us to be in too big of a box on the term cost-effective programming.
Thank you, Director. Adrian.
So on number 5, I think we had talked about this, but just a language change. I think we want to say to investigate research-based methods to reduce the incarceration rate without affecting public safety, rather than saying reduce the prison population.
That's a good point. So
Yeah,
9
and what do you
9
see as the difference, Adrian?
Yeah, to me, this is a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because if you say to people that we are looking at reducing the prison population, the target becomes the people who are in the prison.
Right.
And people will look at how do you open the doors immediately. And those policies are much, much different than what I think the goal is, which is overall and over time, reducing the incarceration rate so that the population comes down, as opposed to directly targeting, here's your population right now. How do we get this population out super
Well,
fast?
I also think if you use the word prison, you potentially exclude jail.
Yeah. And you can track a rate better than, a population is going to fluctuate, with, you're not measuring the right thing. If you make a change to a sentence structure, you want to look at how that impacts incarceration rate, not necessarily the population. This population is also driven by who comes back on, from a probation violation or a TPV. But again, from my perspective, I think we run into problems when we're looking at the current population and how do you make that population get smaller right now, as opposed to a rate of people coming in and then over time making the whole system get smaller.
Go to Director Hilke, then Rep Weissman, and then Vincent, all with the note that if any of your comments require group conversation, we'll go from there. But Director Hilke.
Actually, I had forgot to put my hand down, Barrick, so I'm good.
Very good. Representative Weissman, please.
Thanks, Barrick. I guess just comments on recent comments. To Director Helke's point, I mean, I sort of get it, and maybe I could propose alternative language. I don't know, financially efficient. Like, here's a stupid analogy because I'm on 3 hours of sleep. If I'm trying to get a cup of drip coffee on current market, $2 is probably cost effective. $10 is not. If I am trying to get, I don't know, an S-Class Mercedes-Benz, $80,000 is probably cost effective. $2 is not. I think it's a fair point that, there may be a worthy goal that nonetheless requires a substantial investment, and it would be the purpose of this group, among many others, to grapple with that kind of thing. I don't think that we are here to only propose stuff that is on the cheap. I mean, we need to be cognizant of budget reality, and of course, ultimately, the GA and the JVC do. I think maybe, minor polishing could obviate that concern. And then to Adrian's point, I think I agree that what we care about is incarceration rate. I mean, we commonly measure by, per 100,000. As we continue to grow as a state, that's sort of I think it's a more valid, useful measure, at least over the long term.
So Mike, is it fiscally effective or fiscally responsible?
Responsible is potentially loaded. I don't know. My concept of efficiency is doing something with not more than you need to do it. And if you're trying to do a little thing, then you should only need a little bit to do it. If you're trying to do a gigantic thing, you'll need a lot. All right, how much money did we spend putting, human beings on the moon? A ton. Was it efficient? That's a separate analysis apart from the amount that we spent. That's just sort of how I think about the concept of efficiency. Maybe it helps or maybe it doesn't.
So after public safety and in a fiscally efficient manner, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Efficient to me is more honed in than effective.
Okay.
Vincent, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So just thinking about that conversation we were just having about item 5 and incarceration rate. Our incarceration is not the only feature of criminalization. So would it make sense to say to reduce the criminalization and incarceration rate without affecting public safety?
That one's getting out there for me personally.
Yeah, and I wanted to call out incarceration because we do say investigate effect in number 3, alternatives to incarceration and community programs and alternatives that provide for avoidance and deflection from the systems. So that was capturing a lot of the conversation we had at the last meeting about avoidance and deflection. But for me, I think we really need to look at reducing the number of people incarcerated, and I would rather call that out. I mean, I think 3 talks about reducing through programming people out of the systems.
You're right. Thank you, Maureen.
thought.
I see that. And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I agree with incarceration rate. I thank you for explaining that, Adrienne, because I think that's important to understand as we move forward.
Other comments on the duties that you see in front of you here? And it looks like we've got at least 3 that we will be revising. Number 5, to replace population rate with incarceration rate. Number 7, changing from suffering to living with, and from disorders to conditions. And on 9, some revision to not just talk about maintaining public safety, but talking about being financially efficient or effective. Any other requested revisions or discussions on the duties we see laid out here? And I'll leave that open as I go to part 2 of my question to you. Are there any duties not covered either by the broad ones in 1 and 2 or the totality of these 10 listed that you think are critical to include in the report and ask the legislature to include in the duties of these commissions?
Let me just say this. I don't think this group may be able to do all this stuff right away. So as we write the report, I think number 1 and 2 are really important. And then to address, as determined by the group, a lot of the rest of the stuff. But eventually, I think those are crucial issues. Prison population.
Yeah, and I think where we are with these 10, they're broad enough, even though we drill down a little bit as we go down the list. They're broad enough to let these task forces do almost anything in this arena. So I would be concerned about doing much more than these 10.
Anybody
right, but there may be there's room for a 90-day study group or whatever for a discrete issue as identified as needing, study and work right away. The short-term one that may not fall into one of these particular categories. But I think we've all agreed that this group should be broad in its perspective and not necessarily solving specific problems, but systemic issues.
I do want to call attention to Representative Weissman's question or comment in the chat. Do we say that X and Y need to be done within the first X months and the rest are the general guiding goals?
I guess my thought on that, Mike, would be maybe that's in the statute that's get drafted, that these things get put together quickly as opposed to in the duties. The general duties, I don't know that you want to set those restrictions yet. Yeah, and yeah, I got you.
Agree with you.
Okay.
Representative Weissman, I hear more power being given to you on that. Anyone else want to offer thoughts on these before we go to a roll call on these duties being included in a report as discussed and revised on this conversation?
Well, let me just say, what we didn't put in here that was in CCJJ was like anything referred by the legislature or whatever. I think we didn't necessarily want like a legislation, a bill to say these groups shall do X, Y, and Z. We wanted the group to identify the issues. I guess that can happen. We can't limit that. And so I just want to say why that was not put in there. And then the second thing is, do we need a generic or any other issues as, you know, areas of concern that is specifically identified by the group?
Thoughts from the group in particular on the idea of a catch-all duty of other tasks or other tasks as identified.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to put that in, but we may want to. And on number 10, you know, I was just reaching back into my brain. We may need to more juvenile specific people about detention, out of home placement, DYS. I wanted to include, you know, more about families and schools and communities and assistance. And I hope that captured it for the juvenile people, but we might, I don't know if Jason's on here, and we might need him to massage some of those terms. So just wanted to highlight that before we did a vote.
Yeah, and Rep. Weissman, I'll get to you in just one second. I do want to just read out Janet Drake's comment in the chat saying this has been a great discussion and appreciate the thoughtful work. It's noteworthy to her that these duties will be read in conjunction with the mission and the vision statements.
Yeah, good
appreciate
point.
that point.
Good point.
Representative Weissman.
Thanks, and I appreciate Janet's point just now too. Very, very lawyerly point, and I agree with it. To Maureen's, I guess two things. Tom, I agree. I don't know that we need to add a catch-all because I think almost anything, particularly glossed by mission and vision per Janet, almost anything the group might want to do is, I think, probably already here. I think the upshot of a lot of public comment we had is that the scoping, the nature of the task forces should be, you know, more organic, more independent, and less driven by this place. So I agree with kind of not calling out here and inviting the legislature to try to give direction. If in some future year somebody does a bill that says, you know, the commissions shall do blank, I mean, that's within the prerogative of the legislature to do, but I don't think that we need to invite it from the get-go.
Okay.
So that is me balancing out the quantum of power that Derek just assigned to me.
I appreciate it, Representative.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead with a roll call, and then we'll have some concluding conversations about next steps. But the ask will be, do you support the advancement of these duties as discussed and revised on this conversation to be included in the report of the Working Group to Transform Criminal and Juvenile Justice? Vincent Atchity.
Support.
Maureen.
Support.
Ubaldo.
I support.
Thank you. Janet.
Support. Thank you.
Sheriff Fitzsimons.
I support. I just have a question about number 9. Do we land on what we're ending it with there?
Thank you. My understanding, and Tom or Maureen correct me, is we landed on financially or fiscally efficient.
Yeah,
Thank-
so you'd have to, so we're deleting, after improvement, you're deleting that do not increase cost of incarceration, improvement that contributes to clarity in sentencing.
Yes. Senator Gardner and Senator Gonzalez are not with us. Tristan,
Support.
Debbie,
I support.
Jason, I do not believe is with us.
I'm here,
You are, I'm
Uh,
sorry, I got you on back on
Yeah,
my screen. Jason, sorry about that.
and I want you to know that I support.
Thank you, sir. Chair Raines,
Support?
Rep. Soper is not with us. Director Stansel is not with us, I believe. Victoria,
Support.
Emily,
Support, thank you.
Representative Weissman.
I support.
With that, I'm going to stop sharing screen. We have unanimous support of all members in attendance for the duties. As a reminder, we will get these revised. You will see the revised versions in the final report. Our timeline is that we will get to work drafting this evening now, or continue the drafting. We will get a version ready for all of you by Monday. We'll send it to you with the ask for any comments Tuesday. I will ask that the comments be substantive changes you see. I'm sure all of us could write the language differently, and that's no pushback. I'm sorry, I was just flagged for me. Director Hilke, I may have skipped over you, and I apologize on that vote.
I thought you were cutting me out already, Barry.
You're a non-voting member, I was told. Now, Director Hilke, my apologies.
Yeah, no, I support.
Thank you. And Carrie, thank you for helping me on that roll call. So as I was
Yeah,
saying.
and I would also say that Adrian's here and can vote for Director Stansel for
Thank you.
DOC.
Adrian for the DOC.
Support.
Thank you. And I apologize on trying to cut out both of our directors from CDPS and corrections, but we do have full support. And thank you, Maureen. So we'll get that around, and we welcome your feedback. If you think the language included is substantively off, we want to hear that. If there's things that need to be included, again, and ask that if you dissented on any of the things that we did vote on to date, if you could get me language to include on that, we will include a section about implications, considerations, and concerns raised during the vote. So we'll include all of that. Otherwise, we will be ready to get this to all of you Monday for your feedback Tuesday, to be revised and in Tom and Maureen's hands Wednesday to submit to the governor ahead of our goal. I will leave it to them if we get back together. I know Carrie was out buying us some supplies and saw a bunch of unicorn cupcakes that she felt like might be appropriate for a celebratory get-together. So we'll see if we can do that. With that, Maureen and Tom, I'll leave it to all of you. In case we're not back together as a group, I just want to thank you all for the honor of being able to support you through these conversations. You've come to consensus against what were some odds and some folks that thought this was going to be much more contentious. And as a facilitator, it's been my pleasure to see the collaborative spirit that got us to this point this quickly and this comprehensively. Tom and Maureen, to you to close us out.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I really appreciate all the effort and thoughtful input everybody in this group, put into this. Everybody took it seriously. This was a significant task, and we'll see how this comes together in legislation. But regardless of how it turns out, I think, frankly, we did a phenomenal job given where we all started and the different perspectives we brought to the table. And great job, Barrett and Corey. We couldn't have done it without you. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and I just agree. The wisdom was very stunning. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other members want to offer closing thoughts before we end this one, bonus meeting a little early?
It was great connecting with everyone and getting to know everyone. I hope that we can work together in the future again. And I just like the way that it happened. And shout out to our leaders and everybody being able to show their diversity of thought. And I think that is going to be special. So thanks. And thanks to our facilitators also.
Thank you, Dr. Lester. I see Rep. Weissman and then Vincent, and then I think I saw Director Hilke come off mute. Representative.
Yeah, thank you. You know, late breaking thought here. You know, the goal was always that there be a bill. We'll get the report. We'll need to go through some paperwork. Drafting will begin. At some point, you know, this is a bill in committee like any other bill, presumably the judiciary committees. You know, folks here, I think, needn't necessarily come in officially in a support position, but it does occur to me just to sort of provide some context. Everybody here, having been in the middle of it, I think is potentially a really just useful, strong, salient witness to inform the rest of the legislature, really starting with the committees in the House and the Senate, just how this whole thing went and why we got here. I mean, I guess at this point, I'm assuming I'm, you know, probably the 4 legislator members. I don't want to speak for my colleagues here. You know, it makes sense to be on the bill, and the duty to explain all of this falls first on us. But there's certainly a role for anybody else here who would like to claim it. And if you don't or can't, I mean, that's fine too.
Thank you, Representative. And if it's okay, I'll stay in touch with you. So as a bill is drafted, introduced, and there's any readings or hearings, we'll make sure we alert all of the members. Vincent.
Oh, just a word of appreciation for all of you. It's an honor and an education, and a special word of appreciation, especially for Maureen and Tom and their cooperation with one another and leadership for someone who's an outsider to the justice system is really inspiring for the possibilities of justice. We can have our defenders and our prosecutors understanding our purpose so clearly together. It's great.
Thank you, Vincent. And you're seeing some nods and some signs of applause that people are appreciating your comment. I see no other hands or folks coming off mute, so I will just thank you for your time. We will be in touch no later than the end of the day Monday with a draft for your review and your feedback. Thank you, everybody.
Just
Yeah,
Eric, real quickly. I don't think we have anyone from the public here, but I assume we have to see if there's public comment.
We thank you for flagging that. We have no members or nobody on this call other than members of the working group at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. We will talk to you by email next week.
Happy trails.
Bye, everyone.